wanted to ask you about the idea. You've said that the person we think we are is completely different than the person we actually are.
Oh, you've done your homework, because if
these
you're
are all
going to
the
ask
things
me
that I'm-
anything, that's probably the most important question.
I just find that such a... Can you
Yeah.
explain?
And I know that you've been to our lab at the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society, and Judd Brewer, this was part of your 60 Minutes show, showed you some of the neural feedback around the practice of mindfulness. And so in the midline of the brain is what's called a network that's known as the default mode network. Because when you put people in an fMRI scanner and tell them to do nothing, they default to thinking. And what are they thinking about? Their favorite subject, of course, our favorite subject, me, moi, myself, I. And it's like my shopping list, my to-do list, my tomorrow, my yesterday, and it's a narrative. So some people also call it the narrative mode, and it's a particular region of the brain that just goes insane when you're told to do nothing. Just lie there in the scanner. And it also involves mind-wandering, creativity, so it's not bad, but it is imprisoning. The alternative is after 8 weeks of training in MBSR, there seems to be another network, a lateral network that comes on, becomes active, and there's an uncoupling between these two networks. You still need this one, or you won't find your way home at night. I mean, you have to know who you are in a certain conventional way, but on the other hand, if you're stuck in the narrative of who you think you are, and you say, like, I'm John Kabat-Zinn, and I live here, and that's all in a certain way just relatively. If I really am true to myself, I have to say, there's a lot more not knowing who I am than knowing who I am. And what's wrong with that, actually? Because, the narrative is never big enough. That's your point, I think, in asking. Is like, we have these small narratives of what it means to be an American, or what it means to be a Democrat, or what it means to be a Republican, or what it means to be this and that. And none of them are true. None of them, if you examine it. They're not true. They're fictions, or they might have an element of truth that when they would think, well, yeah, this is true because there's a 10% true or something like that. And what I'm saying is that when we drop into wakefulness, into awareness, into this spaciousness of who we already are, that is almost like impossible to put into words. That's why poetry becomes so important. But that humanity and what happens on the performance stages in the Louvre and the Metropolitan Museum of Art and so forth, that's the human mind and heart when it knows itself. When the human mind doesn't know itself, you get Auschwitz, you get the killing fields of Cambodia, you get Rwanda, you get Charlottesville. And so that's our challenge. It's like a yoga. You work with the tension. You work with the sort of elasticity and plasticity, but also the resistance, if you will. You don't work against the resistance, you work with the resistance. That's the deep grounding of the martial art of Aikido. So what we're doing is, like, in some sense, we're doing, by dropping in on ourselves, we're doing Aikido on the entire world, together.
I think we're almost out of time. Is there... as people think about the day and face this day, what do you hope people come away at the end of the day with?
Well, let's let this entire day be a deep inquiry and a meditation in and of itself into who am I? Who are we? Not believing the narratives that come up, but staying with the questioning. The answers are cheap. The questioning, priceless. And trusting that there's a wisdom that's distributive throughout all of us, that by virtue of our DNA, by virtue of the plasticity of our genome, all sorts of ways in which we are so much bigger than who we think we are individually and together, that when we have these kinds of conversations and we listen deeply, inwardly and outwardly, they can find a certain kind of clarity, wisdom, and bravery that will allow us to sort of find the edge of them and us and allow it to dissolve into love, into what I think this is all about. When you take your seat in the morning to practice, it's a radical act of sanity, but even more deeply, I've come to see it as a radical act of love. And when you do this, even you yourself and nobody else is doing it, the lattice structure, so to speak, of the entire world is different simply because there's one more locus of sanity for this moment, one more locus of caring beyond the me, myself, and I. That's awareness, and that's cultivatable. It's intimacy with our own awareness. And it's loving what is, as Byron Katie says, it's loving what is. That doesn't mean you have to accept it. Acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation, to loop back to your other question. Acceptance means recognizing things as they are and then responding appropriately instead of reacting from someplace out of your own mind. Thank you. We are out of time.
Kabat-Zinn.
Yeah.
Well,